I can remember the exact moment when everything shifted, when the air itself seemed to tighten, when laughter turned into silence sharp enough to cut skin. It was a Sunday evening. Our house smelled of roasted chicken and thyme, my mother's favorite. She and my brothers were visiting, and for once, I felt a sense of peace. The kind that comes from routine, good food, family around the table, and the illusion that everything in your life is steady. My wife, Clara, sat beside me, refilling glasses of wine. Her daughter, Lily, lounged across from me with her phone tilted slightly under the table, thumbs moving fast. She was 20, spoiled, and clever enough to know it. I had tried for years to reach her, to be some kind of father figure, or at least a stable man in her life, but she had walls higher than pride itself. The conversation had been light. My brother Mark was telling a story about his co-worker who accidentally glued his tie to a table. We laughed. Even Lily cracked a smile. For a moment, I thought, maybe we're turning a corner. Then I made a simple request. Lily, could you please put your phone down while we eat? It wasn't harsh. It wasn't angry. It was something any adult at that table could have said. She looked up at me, her eyes slow and deliberate, lips twisting into a smirk that had no business belonging to someone her age. You're not even real family, she said. Don't tell me what to do. The sound dropped out of the room like air from a burst balloon. My fork hovered midair. My brothers froze. My mother looked down at her plate, pretending to adjust her napkin. Clara, my wife, stared at her daughter in silence for a heartbeat, then sighed. Lily, she said weakly, don't start. That was all. No correction, no apology, no acknowledgement that what had just been said was a line crossed. I swallowed, the food in my mouth suddenly dry as ash. My heart thudded, not from rage, but from something colder. A realization. I smiled, just slightly. The kind of smile that says I heard you loud and clear. I changed the subject. I didn't raise my voice. The rest of dinner went on like a play performed by ghosts. My brothers excused themselves early. My mother hugged me longer than usual before leaving, whispering, "Let it go, son." But I couldn't. That night, after the house went quiet, I stood by the living room window, staring out into the dark. The reflection staring back at me didn't look angry. It looked hollow, tired. Clara came in, her robe brushing softly against the floor. "You're still up," she said. "I wanted to talk," I said, "about what happened at dinner." She tensed. "She's just a kid." "She's 20, I said, my voice calm, too calm. "And she insulted me in front of my family." "She didn't mean it that way." I turned toward her. "Then how did she mean it?" Clara crossed her arms, avoiding my eyes. "You know she's struggling with things. You can't expect her to see you as her father." "I never asked to be her father," I said quietly, "just to be respected in my own home." And then came the sentence that burned its way into my memory forever. "She is not your daughter," Clara said. "Don't correct her." For a moment, everything inside me went still. I could hear the faint tick of the clock on the wall. My chest felt tight, but my face remained still. I nodded slowly, as if accepting terms of a deal I hadn't agreed to. "All right," I said. That was it. One word. One small word that meant something neither of them understood. When I went to bed that night, Clara was already asleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every moment of the past 3 years. The money, the late nights at work, the birthday trips, the car I bought Lily when she got into university, the tuition I paid without hesitation, the apartment near campus I leased in my own name, so she'd have somewhere safe. All of it, I realized, had been my way of earning a family. I thought that if I gave enough, loved enough, provided enough, eventually they'd see me as one of their own. But what I got in return wasn't love. It was entitlement dressed as gratitude. That night, the warmth I once felt toward them drained away like water through an open hand. In its place came something colder, clarity. Over the next few days, I spoke less. I listened more. I noticed how Lily never thanked me for anything, how Clara excused every slight. I watched the two of them move through the house as if I were a piece of furniture, useful, silent, replaceable. It was almost funny. I had built this life for them, this house, this comfort, This illusion of stability, and they believed they owned it. They forgot the foundation it all stood on me. One morning, while Clara was on the phone with her sister, I walked into my study and opened my file cabinet. I hadn't looked at the paperwork in months, but everything was still there. Contracts, receipts, bank documents, property titles. Lily's car, registered under my name. Her tuition, paid through my personal account. The apartment lease, mine entirely. Every privilege she enjoyed was tethered to me, like a string waiting to be pulled. I sat back in my chair, the corner of my mouth lifting slightly. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. That's the difference between fury and resolve. One burns out fast, the other reshapes the world. That night at dinner, Clara asked why I was so quiet. I told her I was just tired from work. Lily rolled her eyes and said something under her breath. I didn't even react. The calm scared her more than shouting ever could. Later, as I washed the dishes, I looked out through the window again, at the faint reflection of myself in the glass. That smile, the one from that night, returned. Small, cold, knowing. They thought they had won some invisible argument. They thought their words had no weight. But every empire falls not from war, but from within, and I had already begun pulling the first brick from the wall. As I turned off the kitchen light, I whispered to myself, "She's not my daughter." And in that moment, the plan began to take shape, not out of rage, but out of perfect, deliberate calm. Because when someone tells you that you don't belong in your own home, you don't argue. You remind them, quietly, whose name is on the door. There's a strange calm that settles, and once you stop trying to be understood, when you finally realize that no explanation, no conversation, no plea will ever change how someone sees you, something inside you hardens. Not out of hate, but out of peace. That's where I was. The morning after that quiet dinner, I got up before dawn. Clara was still asleep, one arm stretched across my side of the bed, like she owned even the emptiness I left behind. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I poured myself coffee, no sugar, no milk, and sat at the table staring at nothing. For years, this kitchen had been the heart of our home. Laughter, breakfasts, small arguments, late-night talks. But now it felt different, like a stage where the actors had forgotten their lines. Yet the show went on. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found one name I hadn't used in a long time: Miller. He wasn't just my lawyer. He was the kind of man who handled things quietly. No judgment, no questions, just results. I typed a short message, "Need to meet," discreetly. His reply came within a minute. Same office, 10 a.m. Clara came downstairs around 8. "You're up early," she said, yawning. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. She smiled faintly. "You've been distant lately. Is everything all right?" I looked at her for a moment, the woman I'd once sworn to build a future with, and I realized something painful. I didn't know her anymore. Or maybe I'd never really known her at all. "I'm fine," I said. "Just have things to handle." She nodded, satisfied with that half-truth, and busied herself making tea. Lily came down moments later, earbuds in, wearing one of the shirts I'd bought her last year. She barely glanced at me as she grabbed a croissant and headed out the door. The car keys jingled in her hand, my car keys. I watched her drive off in the vehicle I'd paid for, fueled, insured, and maintained. A small smile tugged at my lips. I made a mental note. That's the first one to go. At 10 sharp, I walked into Miller's office. He was an older man, gray at the temples, sharp-eyed behind his glasses. "It's been a while," he said, standing to shake my hand. "It has," I said, sitting down. "So, what can I do for you?" I leaned back in my chair. "I need to revoke a car title, terminate an apartment lease, and cancel a tuition payment plan. All legally, all quietly." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Personal matters?" "Very." He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "No problem. Everything in your name?" "Yes," I said. "Everything." "Then it'll be clean." He scribbled notes on a pad. "Give me 48 hours. That was all. No moral lecture, no curiosity. Just quiet efficiency, exactly what I needed. As I left his office, the air outside felt lighter. The city noise buzzed around me, but inside, I felt still, grounded in a way I hadn't for months. That night, I came home later than usual. Clara asked where I'd been. Work, I said simply. She frowned but didn't press. Over the next few days, my silence became a ghost that haunted the house. I answered questions with single words. I didn't argue, didn't laugh, didn't rise to bait. I just existed, calm, polite, unreadable. Lily noticed first. "Mom," she said one night when she thought I couldn't hear. "He's acting weird." "He's probably just stressed," Clara replied, her voice uncertain. "Give him space." But it wasn't space I needed. It was distance, and I was already creating it. By the end of the week, Miller had sent the confirmations. Car title revoked. University tuition canceled. Apartment lease terminated. Just like that, the threads began to unravel. That night, as I sat at my desk reviewing the papers, I realized how easy it had been, how fragile the illusion of stability really was. They had thought they were untouchable, that my presence was permanent, that the money would always flow. But power, I'd learned, isn't about shouting or threats. It's about quiet control, knowing what you can take away and when. I folded the documents neatly and placed them back in the drawer. Then I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat by the window, and watched the rain begin to fall. Each drop hitting the glass felt like punctuation to a truth I'd known all along. People don't respect what they don't fear losing. The next morning started like any other. Lily came down, phone in hand, hair tied up, wearing that look of practiced indifference. She grabbed her bag and said, "I'll be late tonight." I nodded, sipping my coffee. She was halfway out the door when she stopped suddenly, frowning at her phone. "What the?" She tapped the screen several times. "Why does it say my tuition payment failed?" she muttered. Clara looked up from her cup. "Failed? That doesn't make sense." Lily scrolled rapidly, confusion turning to panic. "It says the account's closed. My enrollment might get suspended." She looked at me then, the first real look in weeks. "Did you do something?" I didn't answer. I took another sip of coffee, my expression unreadable. "Mom," Lily snapped. "What is going on?" Clara frowned. "I'll call the bank. Maybe there's an error." Lily stormed out to the driveway, phone pressed to her ear. Seconds later, I heard her scream, "Where's my car?" The sound echoed through the house like a siren. Clara rushed outside, and I followed, still calm. The driveway was empty. Rainwater glistened where her car usually sat. She turned to me, eyes wide. "What did you do?" I set my coffee mug down on the porch railing, watching the steam curl up. "Nothing you didn't ask for," I said quietly. Clara's voice shook. "You can't just ruin her life like this." I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman who once swore I was the man she respected above all others now stood before me, defending the same girl who had humiliated me. "She is not my daughter," I said, echoing her own words back to her, slow and steady. "I don't correct her. I don't provide for her. Not anymore." Silence. The kind that presses down on your chest until breathing feels wrong. Lily's face went pale. Her arrogance, that sharp, biting confidence, melted into confusion and fear. Clara's mouth opened, then closed again. She didn't know what to say. I walked past them, back into the house. I could feel their eyes burning into my back, but I didn't turn around. Not once. That night, I sat in bed alone, listening to the faint sound of Lily crying in her room. For a moment, a flicker of pity tried to surface, but I crushed it quickly. This wasn't cruelty. This was balance. For years, I had carried the weight of their comfort on my shoulders, mistaking convenience for love. But now, the scales were evening out, and as I drifted to sleep, I thought, this is only the beginning. After the car disappeared and the tuition was canceled, Lily didn't speak to me for 2 days. She moved like a ghost, pale, anxious, and suddenly fragile. She called the university repeatedly, her voice shaking each time she said, "There must be a mistake." But there wasn't. The portal remained locked. The account remained unpaid. Clara, meanwhile, spent hours on the phone trying to untangle things she didn't understand. "You can't just undo everything, James," she said one evening, following me into the kitchen. She's your daughter, too. I turned slowly, wiping my hands with a towel. No, Clara. She's your daughter. You made that very clear. She blinked, realizing too late that she had no argument left. You're punishing her for being young and stupid. No, I said. I'm teaching her that actions have consequences. Something you should have done years ago. She left the kitchen in silence. I could hear the muffled sound of her voice later, whispering through the phone to a friend, probably explaining, probably lying. I didn't care. By the end of the week, the cracks had widened. Lily's friends stopped picking her up for weekend outings. One of them sent her a message she forgot to delete before throwing her phone on the counter in frustration. I saw it light up. Sorry, my mom said your situation is too messy right now. That's the thing about people. They love the smell of comfort, but the second it fades, they scatter. Soon after, the whispers began. Neighbors glancing longer than usual when I stepped outside. The woman next door, Mrs. Henson, asked in her fake sweet voice, "Everything all right with the family, James? Haven't seen Clara at the club lately." I smiled politely. "We've been busy." She smiled back, but I could see the curiosity burning behind her eyes, the kind that spreads over garden fences and dinner parties. By the following week, Clara stopped attending her yoga group. I overheard her arguing over the phone one morning. "No, we're fine financially. Don't listen to everything people say." Her tone cracked near the end. She hung up and found me at the dining table, sipping coffee. "Did you tell anyone?" she asked sharply. "Tell them what?" "About the accounts, the cards." I looked at her with the calmest expression I could manage. "You think anyone needs me to tell them? People can smell desperation, Clara. You wear it now." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "You've become cruel." "No," I said softly. "I've become honest." That afternoon, I logged into the joint bank account we once shared and quietly closed it. It was a formality. She already knew the money had stopped flowing, but seeing it officially gone would make it real. A few days later, I received a message from my brother Mark. "You okay? Heard some things about you and Clara. People are talking." I called him. "What are they saying?" He hesitated. "Just that things got tense. That she's staying home a lot. Some folks say she's not handling things well." "Let them talk," I said. "They only know what we let them see." He paused. "You sure you're not taking it too far?" I didn't answer that, because the truth was, I didn't feel like I'd gone far enough. The following Sunday, my mother invited us to dinner. Clara refused to go. "I can't face them," she said quietly. "Why not?" I asked. "You were proud enough when things were good." Her silence was my answer that I went alone. My mother cooked roast beef. My brothers laughed and joked like old times. For a few hours, I felt normal again, free even. When they asked about Clara, I simply said, "She's adjusting." That night, I came home to find the lights off. The only sound was faint sobbing from Lily's room. I stood outside her door for a moment. Part of me, a small, dying part, wanted to knock, but I didn't. The next morning, Clara's tone had changed. Less anger, more pleading. "You've made your point," she said, setting a cup of coffee in front of me. "She's learned her lesson. Can't you fix this now?" I looked at her hand trembling as she pushed the cup toward me. "Fix," I repeated. "You think this is something broken on my end?" "She's suffering," she said. "We both are." "Good," I said. Her jaw tightened. "What do you get out of this?" "Peace." It was the first truthful word I'd spoken to her in weeks. Over the next few days, the change in them became visible. Clara's hair lost its shine. Lily stopped wearing makeup. Their laughter, once too loud, too confident, was gone. Even the way they moved through the house was smaller, quieter. They spoke to me only when necessary. But the outside world wasn't as forgiving. Clara's friends stopped calling entirely. One of them, Susan, returned a dress Clara had loaned her months ago, folded neatly with the note, "I think it's best we take some space." It was subtle exile, the kind society reserves for people who've lost their footing. Even at the grocery store, I noticed the cashier's polite smile fade when Clara handed over her debit card, and it declined. I paid the remaining balance without a word. She couldn't even meet my eyes as we walked out. That night, She cried in the shower. I could hear it through the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly. It was something quieter, heavier. Justice, maybe. Or the echo of it. But revenge isn't about feeling good. It's about restoring balance. And I had. A week later, Lily finally broke. She came downstairs, eyes red, holding her phone like it was evidence. "Dad," she started, then stopped, catching herself. "James, please. I can't get back into school. They said I need to clear the dues first. Can you just, please, I'll pay you back." The words stumbled out of her mouth, fragile and desperate. I studied her. For once, she wasn't the arrogant, defiant girl from that dinner table. She was just a frightened young woman realizing how fragile her safety net really was. "Now you understand," I said softly. "Respect isn't free." Her lip quivered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Clara stepped forward from the doorway, arms crossed. "James," she's apologized. "You've won. Isn't that enough?" "Winning was never the goal," I said, setting my coffee cup down. "Remember what you told me that night? She's not your daughter. Don't correct her." "I'm just honoring your words." I walked past them, out the front door, letting the silence settle behind me like dust. Outside, the world looked the same. The trimmed lawns, the slow roll of cars down the street. But for the first time, I saw it differently. Every neighbor who had once envied our perfect little family now looked at our house with quiet curiosity, maybe even relief that it wasn't them. They didn't know the details. They didn't need to. They just knew something had cracked behind those walls. And I was fine with that, because for the first time in years, the balance was back where it belonged. The night the house fell silent again, I knew the storm had passed. Not because peace returned, but because there was nothing left to destroy. The noise had burned itself out. The crying, the begging, the slammed doors, all of it faded into a heavy quiet that clung to every wall. A week had passed since the day I took back everything I had given. The car sat in storage, the daughter's enrollment was gone, the accounts frozen. My wife had moved through the days like a ghost, pacing between the living room and the bedroom, making calls that went unanswered. I watched her sometimes from across the room, the way she'd sit on the couch clutching her phone, her pride shrinking with each ring that met silence. I didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say. I still made my coffee in the morning, still left for work at the same hour, still returned at dusk. The rhythm of my life didn't change. Theirs did. Word spread faster than I expected. It always does when people sense weakness. The neighbors who once smiled at my wife, who came over for wine and gossip, now only offered polite nods from a distance. They whispered after she passed, their pity laced with curiosity. Everyone loves a scandal, especially when it's dressed in expensive clothes. I heard the stories from my brothers before I heard them from anyone else. "People are talking," one said over the phone, hesitant. "They say something's gone wrong in your house." I just smiled faintly. Let them talk. Truth doesn't need defense. It just needs time to show itself. At the grocery store, I noticed a shift. My wife used to walk in beside me, proud, always first to speak, first to be seen. Now she kept behind me, head low. Once, she bumped into an old friend, a woman who used to envy her jewelry and her ease. The friend gave a small, awkward smile, then walked away quickly. That was when my wife finally understood how temporary admiration is when built on someone else's foundation. As for her daughter, she had learned silence. The girl who once raised her voice at me now barely met my eyes. I saw her in the kitchen one afternoon, staring at her phone. She didn't see me watching. Her messages went unanswered. Friends who once called her every night now had other things to do. The shiny image she had built online, the car selfies, the cafe pictures, the expensive outfits, all gone. Without money, the mask cracked. She deleted her accounts within days. She began staying home more. The laughter, the arrogance, gone. Her mother tried to comfort her, but even that connection had thinned. They were bound now not by love, but by shared discomfort. I'd hear them whispering late at night, their voices low, their words trembling. Then, one evening, I returned home to find the two of them waiting again, just like before. But this time, the anger was gone. In its place was resignation. My wife stood by the kitchen counter, her daughter beside her, eyes red from crying. The smell of burnt dinner lingered, an attempt, I guessed, to cook something I once liked. She spoke softly. "You've made your point," she said. "But she's learned. You've punished her enough." I looked at her, the woman I had once imagined building a life with, the woman whose loyalty I mistook for love. Her eyes were tired, her voice stripped of its edge. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. "This was never about punishment," I said quietly. "It was about truth. You both built your comfort on my effort and called it your own. You forgot who made this house stand." Her lips trembled. "We can start over," she whispered. I shook my head. "You started over the night. You told me not to correct her. You chose your side. I'm just living with the result." The daughter's voice cracked. "I'm sorry," she said, barely audible. "I didn't mean." I raised a hand, not in anger, but finality. "Don't apologize to me for meaning it. You did, and now you understand what it costs." They both stood frozen, small and quiet, while I poured myself a glass of water. The sound of the faucet filled the silence. I took a sip and walked past them toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" my wife asked. "To pack," I said simply. "This house is yours now. The bills, the repairs, the taxes, all yours." She stared at me, confusion and dread flickering in her eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done funding ungrateful people," I said. "I've reclaimed everything that was mine. You can keep what you've earned, if there's anything left." Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the counter. The daughter began to cry again, quiet, shallow sobs. I didn't turn back. That night, I packed one suitcase. Just clothes, a few documents, nothing sentimental. There was nothing left in that house that held warmth for me. I placed my wedding ring on the dresser, the same dresser I had assembled with my own hands 3 years ago, while she had smiled and told me how lucky she was. Before I left, I walked into the living room one last time. The lights were dim. The house felt smaller somehow, as if it had shrunk to fit their shame. My wife sat on the couch, her face buried in her hands. The daughter was beside her, silent. I paused at the door. "You wanted to show me my place," I said softly. "You have. Now live with it." The door clicked shut behind me. Outside, the night air was cool, the streets quiet. My car, the one I'd kept in my name, waited at the curb. I slid behind the wheel and drove without a destination. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. Not happy, not sad. Just free. By morning, I was gone. The bank accounts were closed. The deeds transferred. The house, their shelter, legally theirs but financially empty. I left them everything they thought they wanted, stripped of the comfort that made it valuable. Days later, my brother called. "They're saying you vanished," he said. "What happened?" I smiled faintly. "Nothing," I replied. "I just stopped feeding what doesn't respect me." And that was it. No more explanations. No more second chances. Some men break loudly. I prefer silence. It leaves an echo that never fades. Because respect, real respect, isn't demanded or begged for. It's earned. And when it's lost, I don't raise my voice. I just walk away and let the silence do the talking.